Folks, we might get started. Okay, sorry, we might get started. Please stand. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of our beautiful lands and surrounding waters, the Ramangeri and the Ngarrindjeri people. As a community, we recognise and respect their cultural connection.
Almighty God, we ask you to bless this council and allow it to be an agent of change to the people of this city and beyond. Direct and prosper its deliberations to the honouring of your name and the welfare of the people whom it serves.
We gratefully acknowledge the men and women of the Navy, Army and Air Force who made the supreme sacrifice in the preservation of Australia's freedom and democracy. We also proclaim our gratitude to those who return to us.
Thank you. Please be seated. Before we start, there's a couple of things that I'd like to say. For those people that are listening via the live stream also, so I'm speaking to the community as well as the council. In recent days, we've been asked to make changes to our lives that would have been unimaginable a few weeks ago. And I'm not exaggerating when I echo the sentiments of our Prime Minister that the coronavirus is the biggest challenge of our lifetime. And it is certainly the biggest challenge that this council has ever faced. Unlike many parts of the world, Australia, and in particular South Australia, is positioned to deal with this pandemic well. We in South Australia are in front of the 8 ball, and we certainly want to stay that way. Victor Harbor hosts an extremely vulnerable community with over 50% of our population over the age of 60 and many frail and elderly community members. This is one of the reasons that we have reconfigured the room to the way that it is so that we can all keep good distance. I would suggest to the gallery that not just for your own safety, but for the safety of other people, it may be worthwhile having a good think about perhaps at other council meetings, watching the meetings from home as they will be live streamed, and those live streams will be kept so you can watch them again if you want to. We also have a business community that is dependent on tourist and hospitality sector, and our business community will be suffering and is impacted significantly by the restrictions imposed as a result of this virus. In order for us to stay safe and in front of the 8 ball, it is vitally important that you all take this seriously and follow the advice given by our Prime Minister, our Premier and our health departments. We all need to do what we can, slow down the spread of this virus and save lives. We are in this for the long haul, We are in this for the long haul, and this will be our new reality for the next few months or so. Right now, in Victor Harbor, we have the window of opportunity to slow down the speed of this virus. So I'm talking to you all candidly about what we need to do, and also offering some words of assurance to our community and small businesses in what is a very anxious time for them. One of the most important things you can do is to wash your hands on a regular basis, and that seems really simple, but this virus is a droplet formation, and so drops will form on surfaces, and we need to wash our hands because we touch our face unconsciously, often more than 20 times a minute. We must also reduce the number of people we meet and come into contact with through the community. Changes have been made to council services. Most of our services are continuing on as normal, and the council is an essential service, and our council meetings are essential. But there are changes to our services, including restricting access to the library and the delivering borrowing service online, and a new on-call and call and collect method has been incorporated. The library will also be increasing home deliveries, making computers available upon request, So people, if they need to use the computer in the library because they don't have computers at home, can ring up and make an appointment. They will be able to use a computer which will be cleaned well before and after its use. And we're working to live stream children's programs so they can be carried out via the technology that we've got. The Victor Harbour Visitor Information Centre will cease its face-to-face service, but it will continue to provide information online and over the phone. The South Australian Whales Centre and Coral Street Art Space has been closed, and unfortunately council events including the Easter egg hunt and the artisan markets have been cancelled. The decision to close or adapt our services has been made with the well-being of our community and staff in mind. We understand that for the foreseeable future, we're going to have to do things differently and adapt what we do and how we deliver our services to best meet the needs of the community. We're looking at how we can support community members impacted by the coronavirus, both in the short and in the long term. Our 2021 budget process will be focused at looking at a number of measures that we may be able to implement to ease the financial burden on our community and on our businesses. So when we're talking about the short-term things that we've done, there will need to be council decisions that are made in relation to how we can assist our community through the budget process, and we can talk about that more as an elected body. But the most important message that I want to provide tonight to everybody that's here and to those that are listening online is that we all have a responsibility to help stop the spread of coronavirus. I can't stress enough the importance of observing the principle of social distancing and practicing good hygiene by washing our hands and surfaces regularly. If you feel unwell, please stay home and seek the advice of medical professionals or utilise the National Coronavirus Hotline to talk through your symptoms. Please give heed to the advice given by the authorities. Now is not the time to be complacent or to think that it's just business as usual. This is the new reality for the foreseeable future. We also need to remind ourselves that Victor Harbour is a very caring community, and now is the time to show that you care. That you care for your families, you care for your friends, and you also care for community members. If you can, stay at home. Be kind, support each other, check in on your neighbours, and we will get through this. But in order to get through it with the least number of deaths as possible, and I'm not saying that to be alarmist, I'm saying that because that is the reality. We need to social distance and we need to make sure that we follow the advice that is being given to us. At the time of printing the agenda tonight, a number of things have changed. Things are changing very, very quickly. There will be items on the agenda that are no longer relevant, but we will address these one item at a time when we come to them. I'm going to have to leave to go to a video conference from the Premier and the LGA to all of the mayors, which is coming on at 7 o'clock. And so Deputy Mayor Henderson will take my place. And at the end of tonight's meeting, I've asked Victoria to give an update to all of the members around the business continuity plans that the council is undertaking so that the operational side of business can continue as normal with a number of safety measures that has been put into place through the business continuity management group. And I'll answer any questions that you have then. So if we get on to the agenda, just before we do start that, I do remind you.
Sorry.
Peter?
The teleconference you're going to have at 7 o'clock, can that be recorded for elected members to
No,
see as
it's
well?
between the Premier and the mayors, but if there's any information, I'll pass that on to you.
Thank you.
Councillors are reminded of the requirement of disclosure of material, actual and perceived conflict of interests, and so I'll just bring that to your attention. I do have a material conflict of interest in item 10.2. So I will be leaving the room at that time, and the Deputy Mayor will be taking my place in the chair. I think that is all the things that I needed to talk with you about before we started. Thank you for your patience. We now move to page 4, which is item 4, items adjourned and or lying on the table. So the first recommendation is, and this is relating to the unsolicited proposal policy and guidelines. I'll do the recommendations together. The first one is that we receive and note the adjourned item, and then the second one is that Council adopt the proposed policy. We have had a number of workshops on this, and we did discuss the audit committee, independent committee members' thoughts on this. Can I have someone to move that recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Henderson, and seconded Councillor Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 5, minutes of the previous meeting.
Mayor, if I might, I thought perhaps we were voting on recommendation 1.
No, I did say that we would take it both. That I would take both of those recommendations together.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. Thought that would normally have been
Normally, if you'd wanted to do it on
block, you would have asked for that.
well, I said I did.
Okay.
I didn't use the words on blocked, but I said I will do those two recommendations together.
I had some comments on those, on the item 2.
We've already gone through that. Carried. Can I just check that everybody realised that we were doing both items 1 and 2 together? I'm getting nods around the table. Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Robertson. So we now move to item 5, minutes of the previous meeting, and the recommendation is that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the 24th of February be confirmed. Councillor Hales moving that way and is seconding that. Councillor Henderson, thank you. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp?
Yes, Mayor Jenkins. I'm just recalling on my memory, and sorry, I should have, if I had time today, I would have sent something through to the CEO, but my recollection of item 6, when you do a declaration of conflict of interest, I think what's recorded in the minutes is not a true record of what was stated on the night. I believe yourself and Councillor Litley stated that you had a conflict of interest, but didn't actually declare the conflict of interest, where the minutes record the actual conflict of interest. So there's a bit of a pedantiness, sorry, but also Councillor Robertson declared or stated he had a conflict of interest, which is not recorded.
Did he declare or state?
He sorry, my recollection is that everyone who had a conflict of interest for that night stated it, but in the minutes it actually says you declared a conflict of interest. So if we're going to have a true and accurate record of minutes, I think we need to be precisely in what we record the facts. So to me, the minutes are not true and accurate because of that item.
If I may, through the
Yes,
Mayor. Each of the members are given a declaration form which they fill on the night and provide back to the Minutes Secretary, which actually details, because yes, some of the members aren't very articulate in their verbal and clarification of their declarations, but they are all given this declaration form. They all complete it on the night and hand it back to the Minutes Secretary, is what we use to record the declaration as we're required to. But I'm happy to go back and check on that, but in terms of the correct declaration, we utilise this form, which we do hand to all of the members when they declare their declarations.
I understand that the agenda item, the declarations were made. That's not the issue. It's really what's recorded in number 6, as in statements, which...
I'm happy to go and clarify that.
Councillor Glasbrook?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I've had some people who were present at the gallery that evening complaining about the minutes. So the first thing I'd like to ask is a question. Now that we have this item number 6, which we never have had in the past, just from a procedural point of view, just so that we get this right once and for all, we've had issues with this in the past. Is that the time when we should declare properly and officially your conflict of interest on any item that's coming up in the agenda?
It should be properly and correctly recorded prior to the item and in reference to the item. This is also a reminder for members, as we have in the beginning of the agenda, under the content page in terms of the provisions. But this is also, again, it's another mechanism that we bring it to the members' attention that you should be foreshadowing that you have a conflict of interest. But as long as it's recorded prior to the actual item being discussed or debated, and that's where it is recorded in the minutes, that to me is that true and accurate record.
Okay, I'll
Because again, if I just further clarify, there may be at times during the meeting, you bring up something of discussion that you weren't aware that was going to be discussed, and all of a sudden you have a conflict, so it's not going to be recorded then. It would be recorded at the time as well.
No, thank you. So I wonder whether that's just really makes it confusing having that item at number 6. I mean, I think members are fairly well up to speed with the fact that they need to declare a conflict of interest when the item comes up. Yeah, because anyway, it has certainly caused some confusion from the last council meeting, because I finally worked out how to watch the video of our last meeting. And as Councillor Kemp has said, there were 3 people who declared an interest, although it wasn't very well done in a professional way. I don't know if that's the best way to put it. So yeah, I think that it has caused some confusion, and also in item 22.2 there was some issues around timing of the gallery coming back into the meeting and not aligning exactly to what it's stated in the minutes, which has also been brought to my attention. So I do agree that probably there are a couple of discrepancies in the minutes from the last council meeting. So I'm not sure what the process is. I mean, I'll just vote against it, but just wanted to bring that to your
You
attention.
need to remember also that minutes of council meetings are recordings of decisions made in council meetings. So if the time is slightly out, that's, I don't think, a decision of council. So
It would depend on the circumstances, I believe, but I don't want to talk about it now.
Thank you.
Just making aware that there is some issues. I mean, the minutes are supposed to be an accurate record of the meeting. You know, if it's not an accurate recording of the meeting, it's incorrect as far as I'm concerned.
Through the Mayor, I'm happy, one, to look at our procedure to make sure we clarify our process and procedure for declaring a conflict of interest, and make sure that we have either provide some more training or process and awareness for members as to the process that we do that. I'll certainly look at that. I'll review the video and the recording and provide some clarification, articulation of the minutes, and then I'll bring it back to the next meeting around that.
Is there any further discussion? There's no further discussion. All those in favour? Those against? It's carried, thank you.
Division, please.
All those in favour? Councillor Hales? Councillor Mann? Councillor Littley? Councillor Schofield? Councillor Ross? Councillor Henderson? Those against? Councillor Charles? Councillor Kemp? And Councillor, sorry, Glasbrook. We now move to item 6, declaration of members' interests. As I previously said, I have a material conflict regarding the item in relation to the Grants Commission nomination, as there is a stipend associated with that, and I will leave the room at that time. Does anybody else have any declarations of conflict of interest? Councillor Mann?
I have a conflict of interest in relation to 11.5, which I will raise at the relevant time and state that conflict.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. There's no other declarations of interest. There are no deputations. There's one question from the gallery. I beg your pardon. There was one deputation. I saw it as a question from the gallery. There was a request for a deputation by Mr. Blatchford. Mr. Blatchford is not here, and I have said to Mr. Blatchford, I'm refusing his request as the matters that he wishes to address relate to Crozier Hill development. And on the 11th of March 2020, you were advised that your questioning and allegations in relation to the Crozier Hill development against Council and Council staff will no longer be tolerated. In accordance with Council's unreasonable complaint conduct management policy, any further correspondence and or communication from you in relation to the Crozier Hill development will not be responded to. I expect that any questions from the gallery presented to you that relate to the same matters as already considered will be disallowed as per the provision of the Code of Practice for Meeting Procedures, subject matter already answered. I ask you to cease from sending any further correspondence to Council on this matter. If you believe you have a right to do so, you should direct any further allegations or complaints to other authorities who will no doubt decide for themselves whether or not they will investigate. As required, as I have refused the deputation, I needed to report this decision to the next meeting of Council, which I have done so and provided you with my reasons. There are no questions from the gallery. There are no petitions. So we move to item 10, Office of the Chief Executive Officer. And the recommendation is that Council receive and note the outstanding resolutions for March 2020. Do I have someone to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Hales. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Mann. Either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? No one wants to speak to that recommendation? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. Item 10.2, nominations for the South Australian Local Government Grants Commission. I have a material conflict of interest in relation to this item, and so I'll ask Councillor Henderson to take the chair, and I will leave the room.
Okay, item 10.2, nominations sought for the South Australian Local Government Grants Commission. There are two recommendations there, and if the chamber is in agreement, I'll recommend those two en bloc. First is that Council receive and note the nominations sought for the South Australian Local Government Grants Commission report. And number two is that Council supports Mayor Moira Jenkins' nomination for the local government representative on the South Australian Local Government Grants Commission. Thank you, Councillor Charles.
I'll move that.
Thanks for moving that. And seconded, Councillor Littley. Would anyone like to speak to this item? Thank you, Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just wondering if it's appropriate or if we could see the application that was made for this post. And we got in the minutes the form, blank form, but I'm wondering if it
A blank
is
for,
appropriate and
I think the
possible.
application was there. That's correct? Victoria? I think it was a filled-in form.
Yeah, the form, I haven't seen the form being completed as yet. Obviously, the mayor via email, as with other members, they send an expression of interest that they're interested in the position, and we then put it to the chamber for the support, or otherwise the member then completes the form accordingly and we lodge it on the required date. So I'm sure once the mayor has completed her form, if she receives approval or support for the nomination, that we'll provide members with a copy.
Thank you, Victoria. Any further discussion or questions? Councillor Kemp?
I think at this perilous time that our community in the state of Australia and the world's going through at the moment, I just feel that the valuable time our mayor has, I think, should be concentrated for its community. I see that the mayor's picked up the deputy president and a member of SARCOC as well, SAROC, and her to be nominated and be successful in her bid for the Grants Commission. I think while we're going through this period, I think it's better, my personal opinion is that, you know, her time is better spent in our community, showing leadership and providing leadership to our community through these times, instead of being away on various meetings. I know they are monthly at various times, but I just feel that I think it's more important that she stays and works for our community for the next year or two. There'll be opportunities in the future, no doubt, that to sit on these various boards, but at the moment I think she'd be better served here.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favour? All those against? That is tied. So it remains for me to make a casting vote. I will support the recommendations as carried.
Just wondering about the next item, whether or not there's a conflict on that one as well, with this conference. Of course, it's up to the mayor to declare it.
Yes, can we call the mayor back in? Thank you.
Chair, if I might ask, is this council best practice showcase still on? I would have thought it wasn't.
Once we get to the item, I'll give you an update in regards to it has been postponed, that we aren't sure whether it will be held, the actual OGM, sorry, whether it will be held by Skype or not. So there'll still be a requirement to determine some decision around this item.
We move to item 10.3, which is the 2020 Council Best Practice Showcase and the LGA Ordinary General Meeting. That's actually been cancelled, and so we'll just go with the first recommendation there, which is to receive and note the report.
Excuse me, Mayor, if I may, can I ask that 3 also be considered, because we are unsure whether those recommendations will still may need to be supported via Zoom or video conferencing.
Okay.
But definitely number 3 is number 2 is no longer necessary.
No, thank you. Yep, that's fine. So recommendation 1, that we receive and note it. Can I have someone to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Charles. And seconded by Councillor Robertson. Either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Robertson? Oh, sorry, you want to speak? I didn't see you, Councillor Charles.
No, sorry, I have nothing to say.
Yeah, I had a good look at this, this program here, and actually I was surprised about it that that if this is a showcase for best practice in councils in South Australia, I thought that the number of the presentations there, when you read them, were pretty lame stuff. I thought, well, if this is the best that's going on in South Australian councils, goodness help us. So to me, our also the support documentation we provided to those various 7 or 8 items on there were also were pretty weak. I mean, the one on cat management, you can imagine what I thought of the one where we
Perhaps
just say
when we get to that item, you might want to talk to them. At the moment, we're on recommendation 1, which is receiving and noting the report.
Well, excuse me, Mayor, but I thought that we were only going to have two items on this because it's very likely, or it is cancelled, that we're only talking about 1 and possibly a motion to say that it was,
No,
from
we'd
what
be
I
talking
heard,
to
something to do
recommend.
with doing it on video conference.
We'll be talking about recommendation 1 and also recommendation 3, because while the ordinary council ordinary meeting may have been cancelled, they may do those recommendations under 3 via video conferencing. So we will be moving to recommendation 3 after the report's been noted, received. Does anybody else want to speak to the report being noted and received and noted? Recommendation 1. If not, all those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously, thank you. We now move to recommendation 3. We don't need 2 because I won't be attending the showcase and the meeting in April. So recommendation 3 is that Council endorse the voting recommendations relating to the recommendation reports from the South Australian Region Organisation of Council Committee, the Greater Adelaide Region Organisations of Council Committee and the Local Government Board of Directors for the 2020 LGA Ordinary Meeting. And it may not be held on Friday the 3rd of April, but that's when it was due to be held. So there are those recommendations below. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Robertson. And would someone like to second that? Councillor Henderson. Councillor Robertson, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I guess we're dealing with all of those items, right?
Yep.
Okay. So to me, as I said, the items that are there and the proposals put forward, I think are really pretty ordinary at best. And but I was concerned about what we had put in as recommendation support, and I think that we're doing far better. For instance, on the item 7.1, and I'm surprised that Berry Council actually is doing a much better job on cat management than is evident there. But what we have done here is just sort of talking about how we support, the vision for our council and maintaining a suitable environment, etc. And I think we're going to be doing a lot more than that. And we've missed that opportunity on the state of the climate emergency. A lot of fuss was made about passing the climate emergency, but all we're saying here is that this motion supports Council's position in relation to declaring a climate emergency, but we're doing a lot more than that. I mean, what are we saying here? That that we supports Victor Harbour's council position on climate emergency. If we get really hot under the collar about these things, let's put down something that, you know, put down at least that this is what we're actually into on that.
I might just ask the CEO to respond to that query, councillor Robertson.
Through the Mayor, Councillor Robertson, all this recommendation is doing is to actually show when we have our voting delegates, which is the Mayor, which is already previously endorsed, attend and participate in these meetings, and we are required to vote on these particular items. We either support or don't support it progressing through the LGA and the LGA investing money into those particular matters. If it was or wasn't supported at that time, when the LGA undertakes a project or doesn't, is when we would obviously stipulate all the detail, what we are doing as a council. The purpose of this report is whether the council supports or doesn't support the LGA investing any further in these recommendations. It's not a time for us to articulate in any great detail exactly what we're doing. We're well aware of what we're doing. That's why we would or would not support the particular motions. And as a sector, we certainly do relay to the LGA when we are, whether we be leading the way or advocates, or we're behind the ball and we need assistance in particular areas. So, but that certainly wasn't the purpose of this report. It was around whether we did support or didn't support, if it aligned or didn't align with the matters that we were addressing as a community.
Ask a question then. You know, if it's just support or not support, why do we go to the great lengths we do here to not to say we support it? We go into all this, look at the recommendation, the support one from Victor Harbour. It's 3, 6, 9, 11 lines long. If all we have to do is say that it's we support it, just say you support it. If you're not going to do any more than that, then why put 11 lines down of sort of, you know, stuff? And the climate emergency stuff, if that's really something important, say it, just say it's, we support it, but we don't. We go on to talk about, you know, on the electric vehicles one, you know, this aligns with council's activities to date regarding electric vehicles.
So are you asking a question, councillor Robertson, or?
Yes,
Do you want
I'm
to get
asking
to,
a question.
Well, do you want to
Mayor.
get to your point?
Yeah, Mayor, you know, the question is, if the CEO is saying all we have to do is say support, yes, well, why don't we just say support when what we're doing here is saying a lot more than that? And I'm saying, you know, if the opportunity's there, why don't we actually state what we're doing?
Through the Mayor, I can probably answer that. The last time we put one of these up, there was some concern from elected members that we didn't put any context around why we were saying support or not support. So we've tried this time to actually give just a little bit of context around why we're saying you can probably support this because it matches something you've already decided or a policy we already have in place. So that's why we were giving those extra comments this time, because there was some concern last time that we didn't provide any context.
Does anybody else want to, has that answered your question, councillor Robertson? Thank you. Does anybody else want to speak to the recommendation? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Item 10.4, the City of Victor Harbour Community Plan Review Consultation Report, and the recommendation is that Council receive and note the report. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Henderson, thank you. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Schofield. Either of you like to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? Not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 10.5, the economic impact assessment of the Fleurieu region of the construction of a multi-purpose boat landing facility in Victor Harbour. The first recommendation, and I will do these separately, is that Council receive and note the report by Strickland Park Economics. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Littley. And councillor Robertson, was that your hand up? And councillor Robertson to second that? Either of you want to speak to receiving the report? Anybody like to speak to receiving and noting the report? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously, thank you. The second recommendation is that provision be made in the 2020-2021 annual business plan and the budget for the finalisation of a full business case, addressing the particular construction and ongoing financial impost of the multi-purpose boat landing facility of the City of Victor Harbor. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Robertson? And do I have a seconder? Councillor Charles? Either of you like to speak to that? Councillor Robertson?
Thank you, Mayor. Not to speak to it as such, just a question. The full business case here in the body of the report, the full business case is, I believe, $25,000. I was just wondering if that was supposed to include also a environmental impact statement.
Aware of, but I'll check with Victoria.
Yeah, through the Mayor. At the moment, that 25,000 is really just an estimate, and that's why we're saying provision. I'm not sure, but no, it doesn't include the environmental impact statement. And that's where I would like to be able to do a bit more costings around what's involved and present it as part of the budget deliberations.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Charles, do you want to say anything to this?
Yeah, I found the Strickland Park economics, it was fairly repetitive, but it's got some excellent points there, and it's something that we can't afford not to be investigating. I'll put a lot of circles around things here, but that'd be rather a waste of time mentioning each one. But we certainly need this facility, and this report certainly gives plenty of reason for us to accept it. Thank you.
Councillor Henderson?
I'm wondering, I'm going to suggest we adjourn this item in the current environment that we're in, the current situation the world is in. I think this could be adjourned and brought back to the table at a later date.
Just a question, if possible. Would it be better to maybe change the wording to...
Point of order.
I'm sorry, I just needed to clarify, sorry, Councillor Mann. Were you moving a formal motion that we adjourn debate? Because again, I need to have a time as to when you want, why you'd like it adjourned, more information, and to which meeting that you'd like it adjourned to.
I would therefore like to put forward a formal motion that we adjourn this item for a period of 3 months. Bring it back maybe to the July meeting, June or July meeting.
Absolutely, it would then not be incorporated as part of your provision for your 2021 year budget.
I got a second for that formal motion. Councillor Kemp? There's no debate on a formal motion, so all those in favour? Those against? Sorry, Councillor Mann, you had your hand up both times. Can we just do that again? All those in favour of the formal motion? 4. And those against? 1, 2. That's lost. So we go back to that motion and that first recommendation. Does anybody else want to speak to the first recommendation? Councillor Glasbrook?
One of the things I want to mention is that we need somehow to engage with our community. I'm not suggesting that we go out to official, public consultation, but this is not the first time this has been brought up in Victor Harbor, this idea, even though it is a smaller idea. But in the past, it has been very, very controversial. And as I say, I'm not suggesting that we go out and give everybody the opportunity to give their opinion or whatever. I think it's just a matter of, as I've said in the past, bringing our community along, keeping them informed and releasing this document and just really making people aware of what's going on, because that'll prepare people's minds and it will, you know, it'll get things going. I just think it's very, very, very important that we do that. And I think that you'll find that the community will appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. I will ask Victoria if she can respond to that, but can I just remind councillors that when we're looking at the recommendations, please speak to the recommendation. This is just receiving and noting it. It's not talking. We are up to number 2? I beg your pardon. All right. No, that's not a problem then. I was going to suggest it's discussed at number 2. Do you want to answer that, Victoria? And then I'll come back to you.
Through the Mayor, you're absolutely right. And obviously the Strickland Park report is now public. It has been publicly available since the agenda was released. And also if this motion is supported as part of the annual business plan and budget, if provision is made and we need to consult with the community as to what is in it, we would need to articulate some of the projects we are including and why, and that would obviously be a good opportunity to engage with our community as part of that 21-day consultation period around the annual business plan and budget as to what's in it and why.
Councillor Mann, are you seconding that motion?
I
think we've got Councillor Glasbrook moved it. No? So I need to go back. So, sorry, Councillor. Oh, sorry. And then we had the formal motion that, yep, sorry, that's got me confused. Sorry. I'm back with you now. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I just had a question to the CEO. Maybe some potential confusion with that recommendation. You mentioned how you'd like to bring it into the budget deliberations and discussions. However, I guess the recommendation reads that provision be made in the budget for this recommendation. I guess from what you're saying, that's more reading it that this be considered as part of the budget deliberations, and that this is not actually the commitment to it, but looking at the budget holistically with this as a part of that.
Correct. You still need to adopt your budget first for purposes of public consultation, and secondly then formally adopt it, and there will be things coming in and out in that process.
Is there any further discussion? Councillor Kemp.
I'm speaking against this recommendation. I believe good planning, good decisions leads to good management. And at the moment, our planning for the future, we really don't know what we've got on the table in respect of significant projects coming up. We spoke about a lot of them, but there's nothing actually articulated where we can look at and say, yes, we've got all these projects. These are the timelines we believe we can submit them in through the long-term financial plan, whatever process you want to do it under. But the fact is putting this in there, and then if I take you back to 2013 when a business case was written for the Aquatic Centre, it wasn't accessed until about 5 years later, or less, sorry, about 2 or 3 years later, and that was deemed to be out of context with the costings. So the YMCA had to request further funding because the business plan wasn't succinct with the times. So I think at this stage, this is, to me, is premature until we decide when we believe this is a facility that we should develop and put in place. We need to have those timelines put there so we can plan and budget for it appropriately. To me, this is just putting things up, discussions, get a business plan. Oh, well, let's go and do it. And that's not good planning, because we've got other major projects we want to consider and look in place, and whether we can afford it and what are the impacts on our future budgets leading on, because all the borrowings that we're going to be borrowing to do these types of projects will have an impact. But at the moment, we don't have what I call a clear plan for the chamber to look at and to decide what are the major ones we want to deliver in the next 5, 10 or whatever years. So I think we need to get our backyard in order before we start allocating money. I know it's only going to be put into the budget deliberations for discussions, but once it's in there for discussions, it's pretty likely it will go through for a business case to be written. Yet are we ready to be looking at it, and when do we actually deliver if we go do a business case? So why spend money until we're ready, you know, at least in 1 year out or so before we start committing to major projects?
Through the Mayor, I need to be very careful. I do not want to enter debate, but I just need to clarify the ability for council to position things in its long-term financial plan. It needs to understand the costs and the detail involved. So this piece of work would enable you to do that. And the council does have previous decisions where it has made a commitment to continue its investigations for boating facilities, cruise ship boating facilities, and had actually made a decision to undertake the work that we've already done, which was around a business case. This is about further finalising that business case. So I don't have those exact motions on hand, but I am taking that planned approach to having this ready for positioning in your long-term financial plan, which it currently is not. You're right.
Councillor Littley?
I will be supporting this for the very reasons that for it to be considered properly, I think it should be against those other projects that we've got and discussed in the same conversation. And also that we have a hard-working boating facilities working group that is trying to get some momentum, and this is part of the discussions that we've been having. And there's a lot of consideration for this and other facilities and functions, day-to-day functions out to longer-term planning. And this gives, whether it gets up or doesn't get up and go through and be considered in our budget planning, it gives us, gives that group and others in the community a sense of direction that we are actually listening and moving towards moving forward with these discussions.
Absolutely. If you, Councillor Charles, you seconded the motion. So you had your chance to speak earlier on. Does anybody else want to speak? Councillor Schofield?
I won't go into too much, but I do agree with Councillor Littley, and for the reasons that he said. We need to be talking about it, considering it, and as we've said, not everything that goes up into the budget we will approve. So it gives us an opportunity to have a look at where we see the best benefit for our community, and it may be a fantastic thing when we come out of the situation that we're in. So we don't know, we need to plan for it. But I agree with Councillor Littley, so I'll be voting for this.
I think most people have spoken. You know, Councillor Hales?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I can't help myself. While I disagree with Councillor Kemp in terms of how council we plan, I do agree with him on the fact that when we go out and do business cases, we need to be prepared to follow through and build the thing that we're doing a business case for. And this motion before us is exactly how we plan our orders. Without motions from this chamber, administration don't have anything to work on or towards. There is no stated position of council. And given everything else that is going on right now in terms of those big projects that we're planning for, I personally don't think this one's at the top of the list. For me personally, as a councillor, as an elected member for those I represent. And therefore I don't think it would be fruitful at this point in time to be doing a business case for it. So I agree that with Councillor Kemp in that regard, I won't be supporting this motion because I don't think it's the right time. But I disagree with the implication that we haven't planned well.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. Councillor Robertson, do you want to close the debate?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm actually in agreement with all of those people that spoke against this, but for various reasons. The one I would put forward to you, though, is that is really the CEO has pretty well mentioned the main point that I wanted to make, and that was that being shovel ready with projects at this point in time really important. And I think that the efforts that we've made as a council to be shovel ready will bring a lot of benefits to us in the sense of another item coming up later on in this agenda, which is the one about putting forward shovel-ready projects for financing by the special array of grants that are coming from the South Australian government. And there'll be many of them coming also from the federal government. And this particular one is targeted really at the federal government. We know we have state government support, and that it's just another one of those cases where here we have a project which is multi-purpose. It's not just about cruise ships. It's got a number of other tags on it as well. It's not a single-use facility, and it will bring jobs to the area, and it will revitalise the tourist industry, which is the one that is hurting the hardest in our economy right now. So that, and I was at the boat ramp on Saturday, and it was completely full by 10 o'clock in the morning. And that's the Bluff boat ramp, I should say. So looking over the next few years, we're still going to be the target of boaties coming from Adelaide because of the snapper ban, etc. So I hear what you say, especially Councillor Kemp here about I don't agree that just because something goes on to if something goes on to the agenda for the budget, definitely it's got a good chance of getting through. If it doesn't go on the budget agenda, it's got no hope. But I still think that we'll make good decisions out of that. And what Councillor Hales was saying, I think because of where we are, we'll have a good chance that some of those projects that are being put forward to the state government now, the list of 5 of them that were being put forward for funding, we should be getting at least 1 or maybe 2 of those, in which case that gives us the opportunity to say, right, if we're getting significant grant funding, although it will be matched funding, so half of it will have to come from ourselves, but that's half that you don't have to hunt around for in another year or maybe less time that it takes to recover out of this virus situation. So to me, we have a very positive, well-constructed report in front of us, and which has some good figures for our region. It's not just about Victor Harbor. And so to me, it's well worth supporting. Being shovel ready with projects ready to go, it's really important.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. I'll put the recommendation to the vote now. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you. We now move to item 11, Community and Development and the Draft Dog and Cat Management Plan 2019 to 2024. I'm happy to do the recommendation in block if you would like it done in block. Otherwise I can do them one at a time, but if no one objects, I'll do both of those recommendations together if somebody would like to move them in block. Councillor Charles, moving and happy to move in block. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Littley. Do either of you want to speak to that as mover and seconder?
I'd just like to say that and I've said it before, but I'm 100% approve of our inspectors, I suppose is a word for them, returning the dogs and cats to their owners and cautioning them. People, it's very simple. It's just humane. I think that they do, of course, have a look to see whether these dogs or cats have escaped through some means or other and give some suggestions and what have you. But it builds a wonderful rapport with the residents, and yeah, you can understand what it would be like for a child whose cat doesn't come home for weeks. The signs on the photographs of the animal on the telegraph pole and the information on Facebook and all that sort of thing. Where possible, a tagged or chipped, microchipped cat should always go back to the people, and a cautionary note rather than a fine as well. Sometimes people, particularly older people, their only companion is that animal, and that animal gives a lot of love to them. And I'm very glad the way it's currently being handled, and I hope it doesn't change. Thank you.
Charles. Does anybody else want to speak to it? Thank you, Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I think that the dog and cat management plan is a good one, but it's to me really inadequate when it comes to fitting in with some of our environmental policies and some of the other things that we've been doing, like declaring climate emergencies. Its vision is all about nuisance behaviour. Well, I think that really dog and cat management is not about nuisance behaviour, particularly cat management. It's got to be about some really important environmental considerations, and that is, focusing on cutting back on the slaughter of our wildlife, our native fauna, whether they be lizards or birds or whatever. But all it talks about in our proposal here is returning cats and dogs to their owners, which I agree with Councillor Charles. No animal that is chipped and looked after and is found on the street, should be taken away to be euthanized. Every effort should be made to return it to its owner. But if it's not chipped, we still have 30% of the animals in this, the cats we're way down on. We're probably chipped and registered maybe a tenth of the cats that live in Victor Harbor. But of those that are living here, we have yet to chip about 20 to 30% of them. If we go along with just returning cats to owners, we don't need dog pounds. I don't think we need inspectors, because may as well let them go back to their owners naturally. Why do we bother? But to me, what we need to have is a robust program of education and assistance to the especially older people who have cats and dogs as companions. I'm sure that if they were properly informed about what's going on, they would take the measures to put their cat outside on a lead or in a cat run, or one of these things you line fences with to stop them calling out. They'd appreciate knowing that they could get their cats vaccinated as well, and that we could get on with getting more bird song in our backyard. We just it's the management plan we've got here is really weak in this regard. It doesn't really have a programs or really important KPIs, except things like the amount of feces on the ground. I think we need a cat and dog management plan that's got some serious elements of education in it. And I don't see any out there at present. I don't see any. There may be individual inspectors returning cats and dogs to people's homes and checking why they escaped the backyards and giving them people advice on why they shouldn't be. Why they should be containing their animals. But I'm sure that in many of those cases, people will be laughing, saying, well, okay, yeah, okay, well, whatever, when the inspector's gone. We need to reduce it's not just the nuisance value, it is a real issue in our community, in our environment, of making sure we tackle it. And the dog and cat management plan that we have at present is really weak on that issue. We have a law. The law says register the animals, vaccinate, chip, D6. if we find animals that haven't had that done, expiation notices should be issued. In the first instance, we can have a grace period where people get an expiation notice with $0 on it, but a warning next time Fluffy is caught and is not desexed, chipped, etc. There'll be a serious fine, $170, and we'll collect it. So to me, our plan is just a plan for business as usual. It's like saying when you, at the beginning of this meeting, Mayor, you were talking about we can no longer be business as usual. It's like what we heard from the climate emergency
So your
declaration.
time's up, Councillor Robertson.
No longer business as usual. So this is business as usual.
Does anybody else want to speak to the recommendations? Councillor Kemp?
More of an observation through the plan, the objectives and actions. So I noticed that objective number 1 and number 3 doesn't have any KPIs written to them, so you're not quite sure how you go measure those. And it just seems to me this is more of a dog action plan, more so the dog and cat. Maybe it's easier to write about dogs and control them more so than cats, but it doesn't, to me, really address how we control the cats from killing the wildlife. So apart from that, it's just observations that whether you want to include some KPIs on some of those objectives to make the plan a bit more robust, it would be good. Thank you.
Any further discussion? You want to close the debate, Councillor Charles?
No, thank you. Plenty been said.
I'll put that to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you.
Can I have a division, please, Mayor?
Certainly. All those in favour? Just wait for Karina to catch up. Councillor Hales? Councillor Mann? Charles? Glasbrook? Councillor Schofield? Councillor Kemp? Councillor Henderson? Against? Robertson? The motion carried, thank you. 11.2 is the 2019 Victor Harbour Business Survey Key Finding Report. And I'd just like to note that these key findings and the business survey was undertaken, prior to the coronavirus, and so the results don't address the current issues for our business community. However, once we get back on deck, whenever that will be, these results certainly need to be taken into consideration for long-term planning. So the recommendation is that Council receive and note the 2019 Victor Harbour Business Survey Key Findings. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Littley and Councillor Henderson. Do either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Littley? No? Does anybody want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Yep. Councillor Robertson?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. We took that survey today, it will be vastly different. But I do note a couple of things that need to out of this survey, which I don't think will change on the other side of this pandemic crisis. And that is the two of the key constraints that the businesses were looking for was training in marketing, and secondly, that they had a severe shortage of skilled employees. And to me, that was interesting in the sense that sometimes these hiatus periods or these periods where you're going through really tough times and things are really, in lockdown, that these is worth giving some thought to. Plus, I was surprised that 38% of the businesses were home-based. And also for us to be thinking about in the budget for next year and whatever other programs we might develop for business continuity, that we address this issue of this very high proportion of home-based businesses in Victor and how they could come out of that situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Littley, you moved it, so if you're speaking, you'll be closing debate. So I'll just see if anyone else wants to speak first. No one else wants to speak? Then I'll ask Councillor Littley to close debate.
I had read the room there a little bit, thinking that no one else really wanted to contribute. I agree with some of that sentiment that Councillor Robertson has just said. This time, while we don't know how things are going to look on the other side of the situation that we're in now, it is a good opportunity for businesses to take stock and look after their own facilities, do the upgrades, and that we do it in our own lives. I'm sure, looking around our chamber here, each and every one of us is taking stock and getting things in order around our homes, in our own businesses or our own operations. So it is a good chance, opportunity when we can catch our breath, I'm sure, and the strategies when we're thinking. I see our next item on the agenda looks at directing some funds into supporting businesses, and the idea of training staff or taking the downtime to actually move forward with some of those things. It is an opportune time to do that, where and how we can. So it's a good point, Councillor Robertson.
Now put that recommendation to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. I'll do this part by part. The first recommendation is that council receive a note. No, I don't have the new one. Sorry, we go back to the first recommendation is that council receive a note, the 2019-20 Festivals and Events Sponsorship Program round to report. Councillor Hales moving that way. Seconding that is Councillor Littley. Either of you want to speak to that, receiving and noting the report? No? Anybody else want to speak to that? All those in favour? That's carried unanimously, thank you. And you should have the updated recommendation. I'll just check with the CEO here because I'm not clear on that, excuse me. Graham, is that, can I just say that updated recommendation that you've given to us all in the memorandum, does that take over from recommendations 3 to 6? So that one recommendation takes over from all the other ones? Yep, okay. That's what I'm clear. Are the members clear on that? No? Tim shaking his head? So there should be, so it's up on the board. And it's also on the computer. So the recommendation is that in light of the current circumstances and impact of COVID-19, Council acknowledges the need to cancel some events and activities at this time, including the artisan markets and children's Easter egg hunt, and that the funds associated to these events and the remaining funds in the 2019-20 Festival and Events Sponsorship Program be reallocated to activities in support of community and business recovery. Someone like to move that way? Councillor Henderson? And seconding that, Councillor Schofield? Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Henderson? Councillor Schofield? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Robertson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just a quick comment on, but reflecting back on what we've just missed out on here in items 2 through 4. That is, I think it's really important as we move forward, particularly with the time and energy of our events coordinator, I thought that what we were doing in terms of changing our events policy was moving away from situations where this precious staff time was being taken up with all the work associated with relatively small amounts of money being provided as a sponsorship, and that what's going to be really critical over the next 6 to 12 months is an events program that really works for recovery, and that will take up the entire time and perhaps some more time as well from the events coordinator, and that we if we're going to be looking at activities in support of the community and the business recovery, that we don't get ourselves bogged down in small scale stuff such as this, as these. I'm sure they're worthwhile, but they soak up a lot more time than they appear to, and that if we develop a program of events, and this is the way you pull yourselves out of deep troughs like this one is through events, that it will be really critical that we have our events coordinator thinking and acting at a strategic level.
I might ask Director Pathouse to respond to that.
Yeah, through the chair, thank you. Well, I'll just respond on 2 points. One, the first one being the intent to move away from the involvement that our events officer has in the smaller bits and pieces of event-related matters, which is effectively what happened with the council implementing the festival and events sponsorship program. So that's been a significant change that's occurred in this financial year. So those events can still get council support. They're still worthwhile community events. They still need a level of council support in terms of sometimes it's waivers for hire charges and things like that, support for waste services. So there's an element of administration that occurs that needfully occurs in relation to presenting those to council so it can award those grants. And yes, that does take the events officer some time, but certainly nowhere near the time that it previously had taken in terms of a whole raft or litany of events that had to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis every single time. This caps the amount of money. It goes through 1 or 2 calls a year, this being the second one. So it's a little bit more efficient in the way it can be administered. In terms of moving forward, and I guess that's the intent of this alternate resolution or recommendation, is very much about looking at ways and means that we can help support the business and community, local economy through this particular crisis. We're not entirely sure what all of that looks like yet, but certainly events and getting people out and about will be a large part of that. And our events officer will be gainfully deployed into coming up with some of those initiatives in the coming months.
Does anybody else want to speak to the recommendation? Councillor Kemp?
More of a question to Mr. Pathouse. How much money are we talking about in what monies we'll be having available to support any local businesses or economy? And I suppose you said that you haven't actually designed the protocols around that, how that would operate and what areas that you would give out money in the way of grants to businesses or whatever. I'm just curious about how much money are we talking about?
Through the Mayor. At this stage, In relation to this particular report, the Festival and Event Sponsorship Program, the total that this report amounted to was something like $7,500, I think, in total. By the time you add in the Easter egg hunt and the artisan markets, there may be in the order of, I'm not sure of the exact budget for those particular events, but might be in the order of $12,000 to $15,000 in total, just between those things that won't be spent. That's not a lot to get started, but it's at least an effort to start redirecting it into the area that's needed most. There'll be still some work that needs to occur there. There may still be things that can't eventuate this financial year. So we do have to do a bit of taking stock in terms of what's there and what's left in the budget. And that will help guide, as will the forthcoming budget period, where we head with it.
Does anybody else want to speak to the recommendation? Councillor Glasbrook.
I'd just like to just mention a thought, if I could. I totally support this new motion, and things have changed. But I was very pleased to see number 6, the old number 6, in relation to the waste list. And I was actually going to suggest that one of the things on the Waste Authority's wish list is a education van, so that we could tow it around to events all over the Fleurieu to educate people on waste. So just for members' information, if you ever decide that you've got a spare few $1,000s laying around that you'd like to throw towards the Waste Authority towards this van, that'd be a great idea. Thank you.
You wanting money, Tim? Normally you're saying no.
No, I
You
want
us
it this
to
time.
spend.
It's different when it's me. Yeah.
Okay. Any further comments about this? If not, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. I might ask Deputy Mayor Henderson to come up now. I know it's 10 to 7, but I'll get ready, and I think rather than have to leave halfway through an item, this will give you time to talk about it. So I'll come back as soon as I'm able. And we're up to now the McKinley Street Parking Precinct Community Engagement Feedback. Councillor Henderson.
Just a short break while we have a changeover of chairs.
We'll take a short 5-minute break.
Okay, we'll restart the meeting. Thank you, everyone. And the next item on the agenda is 11.4, McKinley Street Parking Precinct Community Engagement Feedback. And the recommendation is that council receive and note the McKinley Street Car Parking Precinct Community Engagement Feedback Report. Can I have someone? Councillor Hales and seconded by Councillor Robertson. Would either of you like to speak to that? No? Anyone else like to speak to that? Accepting the report? No? All those in favour of acceptance? That's unanimous. Unanimously carried. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Henderson, could I
Yes,
please
Councillor Mann.
declare a material conflict for the next agenda item, 11.5 Main Street Precinct, due to my grandparents owning a premises within stage 4 of the development and thus being a remoter lineal ancestor under section 4 of the Local Government Act. I'll leave the chamber.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Mann. Okay, item 11.5 is the Main Street Precinct Master Plan Stage 4 design. And we have two recommendations. The first recommendation is that council receive and note the Main Street Precinct Master Plan Stage 4 design report. Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Second with that, Councillor Kemp, thank you. Would either of you like to speak to that? Would anyone like to speak to accepting the report? No? All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Recommendation 2 is that council endorse the design direction for the Main Street Precinct Master Plan Stage 4 design based on attachment C of this report and authorise the detailed design and documentation phase to 60% completion. Thank you, Councillor Hales. Could we have a seconder for that? Anyone like it? And Councillor Charles, you seconding that? Thank you. Would either of you like to speak to that? Councillor Charles, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, just one thing that I noted in there, that's the property where Subway is, that the landlord hasn't been communicating after many opportunities. So that section which is private land there outside Subway can be included in the plan. I wonder whether that was up until the writing of this anyway. So how far we progressed at this stage, it seems rather strange.
Director Papas, would you like to reply to that?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, I'm not aware that between the writing of the report and now that there's that the owner of Subway have provided any further, certainly the opportunity to do so. Otherwise, the report at this stage.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Councillor Robertson.
Yes, a question, please, Chair. I'm just asking for the CEO or Director Padhouse. The second part of this recommendation, which is authorises the detailed design and documentation phase to 60% completion. What does that mean?
Through the chair, most of our urban design projects are split up into various stages. It generally works 30%, 60%, then sort of 90 to 100%. The idea being is that at the 30% stage, it's about initial concepts, initial feel, around concept. 60% is building on those concepts and getting some clarity around space and where things look and how things might be situated. So it's further detail, and that's the point that we'd normally have some feedback from the public in as well. So this includes the feedback that we received, albeit that we didn't get any from Subway. And then the last 40% is usually then surrendered to that very particular design detail around infrastructures and stormwater and road curbs and all of the technical engineering type detail that needs to be considered. So there might be some level of shifting in that last 40% to make way for pipe sizing and infrastructure pits and things like that. So that's essentially how it works. So the idea of incrementally bringing it to council at these stages is that they're usually associated with progress claims for consultants and things like that, so that we can be we can have some confidence that council is satisfied with where the project's heading, and then we can share that confidence with the consultants that are delivering the project for us.
Thank you. If I could have a follow-up question, Mayor.
Yes.
This is one of the projects that's been put up to the state government for funding out of the expanded grant program. So is this enough, 60% completion of the design phase, enough to put ourselves in the shovel ready category on this one, or should it be higher than that?
Yeah, through the Deputy Mayor again, it's a very reasonable question. We'd prefer it to be higher, but it's worked before. So yes, we aim for 60%. We can get by, because by then the plans are looking pretty good. Okay, they're looking fairly, but it hasn't got all that design detail behind it. They don't always need all that design detail behind it. So we'd prefer 90%. We'd prefer 100%, of course. But in terms of trying to make the most of the opportunity, we'll run with 60% or greater at this stage. We think we can still do that. Like I said, we've done it before with success.
Sorry, another question.
Thank you.
Was prompted by Director Padhouse's reply. This particular stage, we haven't heard much about the stormwater drains and the underground works. Is there very much of that expected to be done as part of this stage?
Through the chair, I can't recall the extent required. When we did a whole lot of stormwater investigation work associated with stage 2, which extended throughout all of the Main Street precincts, knowing that the subsequent stages would be following on. So there is quite a bit of known information there already that the consultants are using and basing it on. They certainly haven't got to the point where they would understand completely what the design specifications for those need to be. That's certainly the next phase of the project, though, beyond the 60%. Glenn might have a bit more information about that, but from an infrastructure perspective, if that's okay.
Yeah, through the Deputy Mayor. The southern part of Ocean Street is fine. Its capacity is adequate. So where we done from Coral to Torrens on Ocean Street, where all that to be removed and increased in capacity. But the southern end is fine. We've had CCT footage through there as well. So we've seen the condition of it as well, knowing the capacity.
Thank you. Any other debate or questions? In that case, all those in favour of the recommendation? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. That brings us to item 11.6. Oh, sorry, we need to call or ask Councillor Mann to return. Thank you. Someone's gone to get him. Thank you. That now brings us to item 11.6, which is the stimulus package funding. we have a recommendation that council receive and note the stimulus package funding report. Someone like to, thank you, Councillor Schofield, seconded by Councillor Hales. All those in favour? Or is there any discussion on accepting the report? All those in favour? Carried unanimously, thank you.
Can I ask a question, please? And this is not to seem rude, I think, but I just wonder whether Councillor Robertson may be reading ahead in this on this item and whether he may have a conflict of interest.
I'll take advice from the CEO on that. I thought that this was one that I didn't have because it's a package of items going forward.
I'll ask the CEO to comment.
Very difficult for me to give you advice because I can't give you direct advice. It does entail the Railway Terrace Precinct project, although that is shovel ready. The designs are in play. It has been allocated costings. This is about applying for a grant application. You need to consider whether you still retain that conflict, and it's really up to you.
Oh, okay. I'll declare a conflict of interest.
You need to specify whether it's material or due to being a property owner on Railway Terrace, and you'll be leaving the chamber.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Mann.
Thank you.
You have another question?
Deputy Mayor Henderson, I would like to also declare a material conflict of interest in relation to 11.6, number 2, due to my grandparents owning a premises within stage 4 of the development mentioned, and thus being a remote or lineal ancestor under this section of the Local Government Act, and I will leave the chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Okay. That brings us to item 2, that council endorse applications to the Open Spaces and Places for People funding program for grants relating to the following projects: George T. Fisher Playground, Stage 2 construction, Railway Terrace Precinct construction, Main Street Precinct Stage 4 construction, Foreshore Precinct Master Plan, and the Foreshore Precinct detailed design and specification, and that council commit to funding these projects should the applications be successful. Thank you, Councillor Littley, seconded by Councillor Schofield. Would either of you like to speak to that recommendation? Would anyone like to speak to the recommendation? Councillor Charles?
It was only 8 days ago that we got notification that the state government was going to give us a little kick along and spread some money around through the 68 councils in South Australia. And I guess we've got a good chance of getting something through. But if everybody got a slice, it'd be about 700,000 each. And I would think that the people of the bushfires, people with drought, might be considered first. What would the CEO presume we're likely to get? What is the hope that we might be able to, how many of these projects, if any, do you think we might get through? And I know it's just a stab in the dark, but I'd like to know, really, because if we got the lot, we'd have to find 4.5 million or so.
I hope the CEO has a crystal ball. Over to the CEO.
My ball is broken at the moment. thank you through Deputy Mayor. It's very, very unlikely we would not receive funding for all of them at all. Hence, we're just trying to throw as many in as we possibly can. In my mind, something like the Railway Terrace precinct, which we know is really shovel ready and will not only create jobs in its construction and the works, it would create an opportunity to celebrate and utilise that space when we're at the other end of the crisis that we're going through. So I honestly can't tell you which one. I just feel we are in a good position to seek to receive some of that funding, and we're in that position because we've got a few of those projects are shovel ready, and we've also demonstrated our capacity and ability to deliver really well on the funding that we've received in the past. So I'm very confident we'll receive at least one of them, if not two.
Thank you, Victoria. Yes. Councillor Glasberg.
Thank you. Yeah, I like to, I'm going to support this. I just wanted to make a comment. It's a little bit along the lines of what Councillor Kemp was saying earlier. Under the budget implication, obviously if we do all of the jobs, as Councillor Charles has just stated, it's about $5 million. There's no, we never include things such as interest and ongoing costs in the budget consideration. I think it's very important that we should know some of that information before we make a decision. Personally, I mean, anyone in business, there's no way you would not consider those things before making a decision like this. You'd need to know what your repayments were going to be, and in my opinion, simple stuff. And I know we don't know which ones we're going to get, but we still could have a bit of a stab in the dark, a bit of an idea, so that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing was that you look at the email that was received by the Minister. The idea of this stimulus is to really create local stimulus. So if somehow we can try and get some more local input into these projects would be wonderful. I know it's difficult. Sometimes they can't compete and, there's all sorts of reasons, but, it would be nice to stimulate our economy with these things. I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Sorry. Councillor Littley, would you like to close the debate? No. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Would we like to call the other councillors back in? Thank you. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item 12, and item 12.1 is the Library Service Review, final report and recommendations. First recommendation is that Council receive and note the Library Service Review, final report and recommendations. Could we have someone move that way? Thank you, Councillor Kemp, and a seconder for that. Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Would either of you like to speak to accepting the report? Still on item 1. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Item 2 is that Council firstly support the implementation of recommendations in the Library Service Review final report as provided under separate cover that can be achieved as part of existing budget resource allocations. And secondly, that we can further consider those recommendations in the Library Service Review final report requiring an additional budget allocation as part of budget deliberations for the 2021 and beyond. Thank you, Councillor Hales. Councillor Charles, you're seconding that?
I really had a question first, but I can second it.
Thank you.
Can I ask the question or?
Yes, Councillor Hales, did you want to speak to that? Yeah. Councillor Charles, yes, you can ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you. The recommendations where we require additional budget allocation. One of the items under that is, or the question is the extension of the walls of the meeting rooms to the ceiling part of that extra allocation, or is it part of the first part A, part 1, support the implementation?
I'll hand that question over to Director Rogozinski.
Thank you. Through the chair, it's part of 2.2. So it's one of the budget bids as presented to council for the 2021 budget. So endorsing this particular recommendation only brings it for further consideration as part of your budget deliberations. It doesn't lock you in.
That's good. Thank you very much, Director.
Thank you. Any further debate? Councillor Glasbrook?
My only thought is there's a little bit of uncertainty around the future. Some of these aspects, I can't say very much, but I just wonder if it's good timing to be progressing this at the moment. So that's probably all I can say, I suppose.
Yeah, Stevie, I'll ask you to comment on that.
Through the Deputy Mayor, obviously currently we are in emergency management response as to how we're managing and utilising our facilities, and that may be for a few months to come. But I also think it's really important the council needs to look for the future. Your key role is around that strategic planning, and this review that was done some time ago is facilitating that. It may not all come to fruition now, but I think it's about planning for the future is still really, really important.
Thank you. Oh. Do you have a further question, Councillor Glasbrook? No. Councillor Robertson, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I've read this review a couple of times actually, in total, and I think it's a magnificent effort, given that the terms of reference were approved in November of 2017, and really the library staff had to do this pretty much on their own, and they did a fantastic job of going through every aspect of the community consultations as well as their own research in putting together their review. And I support almost everything that's there, except that I think that the issue about expanding the library out here for a couple of $1 million was a furphy, was a nonsense. But I think they found some really exciting things in there. Coming back to that issue of what do you do in a downtime, staff training, and one of the, that's the extent to which they're not used in other community support activities during this crisis, but the upskilling of staff was highlighted, especially the digital capabilities of staff in the review, and I think that's something that should definitely be put into practice. I think, if I might be wrong here, but my understanding is that library staff are some of the staff that have accumulated a lot of leave as well. So to the extent that there's opportunities for that training and leave issues to be addressed, that's something that would be very useful. But I want to really focus in on the issue of what was raised in their review about events, particularly events off-site, and the library becoming a creative centre. Can't read my own writing. Creative and knowledge centre, and looking at various service delivery modules. I think they've done a great job in identifying the possibilities of where we could be, and perhaps where we should be in terms of this post-recovery period, in terms of making our economy more resilient than what it's been. The issue of having that IT pipeline from here into the centre of Victor Harbour to help revitalise the central part, and the extent to which library services, if we as a council agree to the library being a creative contact and knowledge centre as well, might be. So that to keep our library out here as a place where a distribution point for the delivery of library items, also relatively quiet space, and which came up a lot, but also allowing staff to be able to be used offline, off centre. And so I think that about the changes to that, following on from their review, to me, one of the things that would be worthwhile doing would be to follow up their review with a consultant's input, very much with the staff involved, in that to look at this issue of should the library project itself out into Victor Harbour, particularly into the central part of Victor, and make use of the capabilities that we do have or could have in relation to expanding our digital network into that part of town, to bring the library more into the thinking and the activities of particularly younger people. So I support the implementation of the library service review overall, but in this particular point in time, I definitely would recommend that that the upskilling of staff would be one of the things that we're focused on now.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Any further comments? Thank you, Councillor. Okay.
Talk about strategic planning, and again, there's some huge costs within this review, which is a great report to give us a clear direction on what we need to do for our library. And I think that again has to be brought into the plan with everything else that we have to be developing as well. But when do we do it is a critical part. I see these two recommendations really are not required at this stage, because if you've got existing budget resources allocations already, that's already in the system, so why do we need to reapprove it again? And as for the future, I think it should come up when we're ready to look at it, and look at it in the context of the whole strategic plan of our future capital budgets, where it all fits in the system. To me, at the moment, we've got the review, which is a guiding document to show us what we need to be doing and looking at, and we can implement them at various times. So I think that's how we normally do business in that sense, but I just won't support these two recommendations because I think we've got the document. I think we just implement it as required when we believe it's the right time, and I think that's what we need to be looking at.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Hales, would you like to close the debate? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Henderson. Yeah, I think it's really nice to be at the end of the library review. As one of my colleagues mentioned, it has taken a while, but we're there now. I think looking towards the future, and what this review does really well is focusing on the fact that library won't look the same. It won't look the same as 10 years ago. It certainly doesn't look the same as 50, 100 years ago. But a library has still remained as a cornerstone within our community, a hub, a meeting place where people gather, where people from different socioeconomic backgrounds come together to use the same facilities, and therefore plays a really important role in our community. So I'm more than happy to move this. I continue to support the awesome work that our library does, and absolutely thank the staff that have put hundreds of hours of time into this.
Thank you. All those in favour of the
Question, Deputy Mayor.
Question, yes.
In case I get
confused
just a
question.
Again. Are we just dealing with 2.1, or are we dealing with 2.1 and 2?
2.1 and 2.
Both of them.
Both together. They're both under the recommendation number 2. And I read them both out as the recommendation. Are we all happy with that and all clear about that? All those in favour? 2, 3, 4. All those against? That's a tied vote. So I have the casting vote once again, and I support the recommendations. Thank you. Thank you. So that was carried. That brings us to item 12.2, the short-term closure of the South Australian Wales Centre for renovations. And we have a recommendation that Council receive and note the short-term closure of South Australian Wales Centre for renovations report. I'll deal with that one first, and then I think the CEO wants to comment.
I think maybe it's of benefit to explain this item. Obviously, in normal circumstances, the council, as your facilities that you have opening and closing times, they would be required to bring a report back to council. I can't normally just open them and close them. As you obviously appreciate, we're under the Emergency Management Act and the Public Health Act, and I've closed and ceased operations of a number of facilities under that act and a delegation that I have to protect staff and community in the current crisis that we're in. The council can either choose just to leave this item be, because at the moment that facility is closed. I'm unsure as to when we will reopen it at this current time, and we may be able to reschedule that works and I bring the item back.
Yes, carry on, Karen.
Thank you. Sorry, through the chair. With the current closure, we believe we should be able to undertake those renovations during this period. So I don't believe there would be a need to bring this report back.
Thank you. So, recommendation 1. We don't need to move these recommendations at all. Yeah. And that includes recommendation 2. Yeah. So there's nothing to be proposed or carried here. Comment, Councillor Robertson, question?
A question, please, Deputy Mayor, yeah, to the CEO or to Karen. These works that are being undertaken here on the exhibits, are they being done by the museum or anyone like that from Adelaide, or are they being done down here? Can you give us a little bit of a background on what's going on in relation to those renovations?
Director Rokoczynski, thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair. Yes, so that is at our South Australian Wales Centre here in the city centre of Victor Harbor, and they are relatively minor renovations, small dollar value with some volunteer support to get the works done at a lower price, but it's just about refreshing the centre without doing major changes, but trying to bring in some of our Nurrunjeri and Rumunjeri history and Whale and European history, sort of trying to bring that story together as part of some of our exhibits. Our staff are working closely with people from the Rumunjeri community, I believe, to get some of that work done. But also, as I said, also working with volunteers to keep those costs down. And staff have also been involved in some of the artistic aspects, or will be involved.
Thank you. We move on to item 13, with environment and Infrastructure Services. Item 13.1 is bus route stop number 8, bus shelter and seating. And we have a recommendation that council receive and note the bus route stop 8, bus shelter and seating report. Someone like to recommend that? Councillor Schofield, thank you. A seconder, Councillor Robertson, thank you. Either of you or anyone like to speak to accepting the report? Councillor Kemp.
Deputy Mayor, it's just more of a question of the budget implications. We've got the current budget set at 22,000, less report expenditure of 12,000, which I assume is the cost of the bus shelter. That leaves 8,000. I'm sure the budgetary money should be 10,000. If 22 takes 12, is 10? Just a typo, I would have thought. Just for making sure the agenda is correct.
Would any of the directors like to comment on that? No?
Yeah, through the Deputy Mayor. Yeah, the report's talking of $12,000 for the bus shelter and install and tactile improvements at the site. And the budget of 22, yes, it should be $10,000 planning budget.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think this is good that we get these bus shelters in place. This is just one. I'm worried about the cost of these things, particularly as they don't necessarily appear to be Wi-Fi hotspots or have a solar panel on the roof. I'm wondering if a question I might have is that if we build these shelters, can we expect or can we administer getting any revenue from them from advertising?
Yeah, through the Deputy Mayor, that's something that could be explored once the shelter's up to see what it could offer to businesses and the way it could be advertised, as you find in the metropolitan part of any capital city. They have advertising on their bus shelters to see if it's worth their while, and wondering what they would pay for that. We could explore that.
Thank you.
If I might, a second one, if we could allow those sort of things on what I guess are council property, would it be worthwhile exploring the possibility of seeing if there'd be anyone or any group within Victor that would be willing to put up those bus shelters in return for having, advertising or other advertising on them, so that we could reduce the cost of these things.
Thank you. Thank you. Director Sinford, you'd like to reply?
Yeah, through the Deputy Mayor. The budget was $22,000, and that was to purchase a shelter off the shelf and install. So I've spoken with the men shelter, and they've given an indicative price at this point in time for the supply only, not the install. We would install that ourselves. They don't have the equipment for that. Also, they can't paint it, like spray painting. We would have to do that. And if it's sent away for hot dip galvanising before the painting as well. So I had needed to include those additional costs, and also any tactile improvements or placement in this position as well. So if you purchased it off the shelf, I've had quotation of $22,000 for the supply and install. So I'm suggesting half of that, or $12,000.
Thank you. If there's no further discussion, all those in favour of receiving this report? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Next item is item 13.2, Recreation and Sport Small Grants Program for 2019-20 individual grant applications. And, right, there's a change to this recommendation. So the first item is that council receive and note the Recreation and Sport Small Grant Program 1920 individual grant applications report. Change to the second item, number 2. So can we have someone recommend that first item? Councillor Littley and Councillor Robertson. Anyone like to talk to that? Thank you, Councillor Littley.
I guess I'm just going to speak, knowing that we're going into the second part of it, is that it looks as though one event, the travel, has obviously been cancelled. Are we aware of the other benefactor here, the status of that event, or, and if so, if we are aware or we're not aware, is there likely to be a change going forward as far as not that person not competing in that event?
Yeah, through the Deputy Mayor, the first one's been cancelled. The second one, at this point in time, it was early this morning, it was proceeding. Hence the wording after program 2019-20, subject to the event proceeding as scheduled.
Thank you. All those in favour of recommendation number 1? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. So we move on to item 2, which is the one that has the changes, which is up on the board there. That council endorse the following individual grants from the Recreation and Sport Small Grants Program 2019-20, and the one remaining is Liberty Sadler, Mighty All Stars cheerleading participation in 5 state cheerleading competitions to the amount of $400. Someone like to recommend that item? Councillor Littley, seconded by Councillor Glasbrook. Would either of you like to speak to that? No? Would anyone like to speak to this recommendation? Councillor Robertson.
Deputy Mayor, just a question. I support this, but I want to check if that's the end of this recommendation, because one of the things that I think we should be looking at as well is that when these sort of amounts of money drop off the perch in terms of from out of the recreation and sport area, that it is the 1920 budget, which is only a couple of months away from being closed off anyway. But if there's any opportunity within these grants to be made to sporting groups that enable them to increase the membership of people playing those sports, I think it would be really worthwhile. But I guess that would require adding another motion to this.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Take that as a comment. All those in favour of this recommendation? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is item 14, minutes of council committee meetings. And we can see them all there. 14.1, Southern Communities Transport Advisory Committee meeting, February 2020. Fleurieu Region Community Services Advisory Committee, February 2020. Recreation Centre Management Committee meetings. Do I need to read them all out? No. Can we have a recommendation that we accept these minutes? Councillor. Oh, sorry, we're doing the Southern Communities Transport Advisory Committee. Councillor Schofield is recommending that. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Littley. Thank you. Anyone like to speak to that? All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Next one is 14.3, No, sorry, 14.2. The screen moved. Fleury Region Community Services Advisory Committee. Didn't I just do that? Oh, that's the other date. Sorry, February 2020. Can we have a recommendation to accept those minutes? Councillor Charles, and a seconder for that. Councillor Hales, thank you. All those in favour, unless anyone has any comments or questions? All those in favour, can I have a show of hands? That is unanimous, thank you. Item 14.3, Recreation Centre Management Committee meeting minutes, 11th of February 2020. Can we have a recommendation to accept those minutes? Councillor Hales, thank you. A seconder for that. Councillor Mann, thank you. Any comments, questions? All those in favour? Oh, you have a question, Councillor Kemp?
Just a clarification, are we doing these all en bloc or individually, these recommendations for this one?
Just doing the one, sorry, first. Yes, the council number, the first item, the council received and note the minutes of the Recreation Centre Management Committee meeting held 11th of February 2020. Thank you. I could only see that one on the screen, not the rest. Thank you. So we're doing the first one. We have Councillor Hales recommending that, seconded by Councillor Mann. All those in favour of item 1? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 2, that council endorse Great Southern Basketball Association representatives, Sue Baxter as representative and Gary Clark as proxy to the Recreation Centre Management Committee. Can we have a mover for that? Councillor Mann, thank you. Councillor Charles seconded that, thank you. Any comments, questions? All those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. Item 3, recommendation 3, that council endorse the resurfacing of Court 1 at the estimated cost of $3,000 at the next available opportunity. Councillor Hales recommending that, Councillor Mann seconding that. Any discussion, questions? Councillor Robertson.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I noticed from this report and also from the minutes of the previous meeting of this committee that this Court 1, as I understand the minutes, was significantly damaged by people dragging chairs across it. But there was also an issue raised in this particular committee meeting that the surfacing of this court used to be an annual affair, and that the recommendation was that it come back to being an annual resurfacing. But there was nothing mentioned in there about, you know, what could have or should be done about having the floor being damaged by people, I guess, who are not basketballers, from dragging chairs across the court, which to me was almost like vandalism. But here we are. We're going to be recommended to spend $3,000 resurfacing the court. But I was keen to know what was going to be done about stopping chair dragging, you know, occurring again.
Thank you. Councillor Hales, would you like to reply to Councillor Robertson? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Henderson. I think I can answer your question, Councillor Andrews Robertson. Sorry. The damage was done because the school has assemblies in there, more or less. And since this most recent case of damage has been done, the school's put in place measures to ensure that they won't be doing it again. It is a continued hot topic, and I hopefully won't be after it's resurfaced and the school takes adequate precautions as to not have students dragging chairs across the floor. other hirers, external hirers are asked to make provisions in that regard. And so, yeah, that I guess hopefully answers your questions in regards to damages. The department won't have anything to do with, I guess, the financial side of the damage.
Part of the question, if I might, Mayor, was that in the comments on this committee meeting, it talked about that the resurfacing of the court was previously an annual task.
Yeah, so recommendation 4, which is the next one coming, is that council endorse subject to funding that both courts be resurfaced annually. So that will be dealt with in that recommendation, hopefully. I'll be highly recommending it to council, that's for sure.
Thank you. So whilst we're still on item 3, if there's no further discussion, Councillor Kemp, you have a comment or a question?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think this is superfluous, this recommendation, because if you look over the page in the budget remaining, the funds have been allocated in the 2021 draft budget for the rec centre building maintenance. So $3,000 has been already established in next year's budget to do it. So I don't think this is really redundant now because of that. Maintenance budget has been including it, so it's already in the next year's budget. So unless it's going to be done this year, and there's no recommendations for this year to be done, so I just see that this is a waste of time putting it. And I would imagine if you go to number 4, that should be a common practice anyway, part of the maintenance, without us having to endorse it, I would have thought. So I just think it's already in there, so why are we voting on it?
I'll ask Kelly to respond to that.
Thank you, through the chair. So there has been a $3,000 allocation put into the draft 2021 budget, but that still hasn't been endorsed by council yet. So in effect, this recommendation would mean that council was making a pre-budget commitment to resurfacing that floor and give some surety to the Rec Centre Management Committee that was going ahead. And so we would reference that when we bring back the next version of the draft budget to show that council had made that decision.
Thank you. Councillor Hales.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Henderson. Just to add further to Councillor Kemp's query, it used to be annually both would get done, but a couple of years ago, only one got done because of some previous damage to one of the courts. So the other one didn't get done that year. And so then in the following year, because we like looking for cost savings wherever we can, it went, last year's budget was this, that rolled over, as in terms of what was spent, more or less was the opinion that the committee was given in regards to why it hasn't continued at both annually. And at the point of this, I guess, committee meeting, the committee wanted it done as soon as possible because the GSABA had serious concerns about the condition of the floor. They would have preferred to have seen it done ideally this school holidays, but because of the contractor's availability as well as scheduling, timetabling, it wasn't able to happen this school holidays, which automatically pushed into next year.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Okay, so all those in favour of the recommendation? Number 3, that's right. And all those against? Thank you, that is carried. Recommendation 4 is that council endorse, subject to funding, that both courts are resurfaced annually. Could we have someone? Thank you, Councillor Hales, and seconded Councillor Mann. Any questions or discussion? Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Question?
Just taking on point of Councillor Hales. Yes, I mean, you can always budget for it every year and have an endorsement by a chamber, but when we come around for deliberations of cost savings and that, these type of things do get cut. So I guess, I think it just should be a part of without endorsement, it should be just a natural program of maintenance that should be done without endorsement all the time. So I think it should be just a regular thing without having us to do it, I would have thought. But if we need to do resolutions to get these things happening, it just boggles my mind sometimes how we make decisions and why.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp, for your comments. All those in favour of the recommendation? Oh, you'd like to speak to it? Sorry, Councillor Hales.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Henderson. I was going to give everyone else the chance to speak before I close debate, but just in response to that, I guess it is the anomaly. It's not how we make decisions normally, but it fell off 1 year because of an incident, and now the committee was just wanted to make sure it was raised to council's attention and put back in there as it was previously. So it's just fixing an anomaly in the system, and hopefully everyone supports it.
Thank you. That's the end of the debate because Councillor Hales has wrapped it up. All those in favour of the recommendation? All those against? That is carried.
Can I call for a division?
Yes, thank you. We'll have a division. Okay, those in favour, Councillor Hales, Councillor Mann, Councillor Littley, Councillor Schofield, Councillor Kemp, and Councillor Robertson. Those against, Councillor Charles and Councillor Glasbrook. The motion is carried. Item 5, the council notes the concerns of the Recreation Centre Management Committee that the fence adjacent to the Recreation Centre car park should be retained or replaced due to safety concerns. Would you have someone recommend item 5, recommendation 5? Councillor Robertson.
I have a question, please, Mayor, or do you want to?
Can we have a mover and a seconder
Okay.
first, unless we don't have a mover and a seconder, and then we'll have questions. You'd like to move that way?
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. A seconder, Councillor Mann. Thank you. Now, would either of you like to speak to that?
Thank you. Sorry, I don't know whether it's an amendment or an adjustment or whatever they are, but I would like to move that we chop out this business of replaced, that the that the fence adjacent be retained, and we leave off this motion the last 6 words, or replaced due to safety concerns.
Through the Deputy Mayor, just noting this is from the committee, so this is the council's committee is bringing the attention, the council notes the concerns of the Rec Centre committee. So you're receiving and noting their concerns. If you wish to move a motion along those lines, I believe that will be an additional motion.
What we've got here is an or in there. So if we pass this motion, what's that going to mean? That we can retain it or we can replace it? I would favour retaining it.
I think Councillor Mann has something to say in reply to that.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor Henderson. Yeah, just in reply to that, so that was what that recommendation is just noting there are concerns by the Rec Centre Management Committee, which I sit as the second deputy proxy on. And that was just in regards to the last council meeting where there was the motion going up about the removal of the fence. And this recommendation, whilst it didn't fit into last meeting, it's now come in this meeting. And it's just saying that the committee were of the view that that the fence either stay or if it was going to be removed, then that it be replaced. So this motion is just purely noting their concerns, and we dealt with that at the last meeting as well. So if that answers any of those questions.
Thank you. In that case, if there's no, you have two councillors. I'll take Councillor Kemp's comments or questions first? Thank you.
thank
Then
you,
Councillor Schofield.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Look, I understand Councillor Mann where he's coming from in his statement, but to me, because that motion the previous councils got defeated, and it was quite strong from the Rec Committee's concerns, and I thought they were taken on notice, that's why the motion got defeated. Just to me, again, this is just doubling up on something which has already been articulated quite well in the chamber and quite understood in the chamber. To me, that just feels that, it's just a waste of time of just going back over the same old ground where everyone accepts it.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Schofield.
Look, may I just make a comment? I've actually had a look at the fence. There's only one small section that I think it could be fixed and straightened, and then I'd recommend that we spray paint it black that fits in with the rest of the school fencing. But I had a look at it and I thought, gosh, if you were a farmer, it'd take you a couple of hours to straighten that piece of pipe, and it would look quite respectable.
Thank you. Councillor Mann.
Point of order. Councillor Mann's already spoken. He's not the mover.
Point of order taken. Councillor Hales.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Henderson.
Are you closing debate?
No, I'm not.
You're
either
not.
of those.
Yes, it's okay.
I'm merely a councillor that hasn't spoken to this motion yet. I totally hear Councillor Kemp's concerns, and had these minutes appeared in last meeting's agenda, it would have all lined up perfectly. Unfortunately, this meeting was held the week before our council meeting and therefore didn't make it into that one. So the committee was responding to that agenda, and now we're 5 weeks later having, I guess, the aftershock of it. It's just the natural course. In those minutes, these motions were moved for council's consideration and concern, and therefore they appear on our agenda here tonight. Absolutely, they were in regard to a motion considered at our last meeting, but this motion itself wasn't considered at our last meeting. So I think it's important to note the concerns of the Rec Centre Management Committee formally, while the other motion didn't do that. For a start, it was a lost motion, as opposed to being a proactive motion from the Rec Centre Management Committee. So I fully support these comments.
Thank you. Councillor Charles, did you have a comment?
I'm struggling to say nothing tonight. I'm really trying to keep quiet, but the duty of care that the high school have is equivalent to anybody's concerns, or any duty of care. They actually said remove the fence, it doesn't bother us, but of course we've got the smaller committee saying let's keep it or replace it. I would like to see the whole thing go, but I just had to say that because it's just a whole lot neater. Painting it black would be a great idea too, but truly I cannot see anybody flying across the road there and getting themselves run over. But of course, as soon as you say that, you're supposed to knock on wood or something. Whatever.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Councillor Robertson, would you like to close debate? Thank you. All those in favour of this recommendation? And those against? Thank you. That is carried. It is 8 o'clock exactly, and we are required to take a break, even though we did have a short break earlier. It's up to the chamber to decide whether they'd like a break at this point in time. All those in favour of a break? No. All right, we'll proceed. That then brings us to item 15, subsidiaries and representative reports. Item 15.1 is the representative reports, March 2020. The recommendation is that Council receive and note the representative reports for March 2020. We have Councillor Littley proposing that, seconded by Councillor Charles. Thank you. Any questions, comments? Councillor Kemp?
I'd just like to give the members and the community an update from the FRAC board. The Aquatic Centre has been closed due to our coronavirus. The memberships have been put into complimentary suspension, which means they won't cost anything in respect of having to reapply or cancel. And if any members do want to cancel, there is a problem with a fortnight fee, but that is going to be put back towards when the centre opens up again and give opportunity for members to understand that if they do want to cancel, there will be a fortnightly fee, but if not, they'll just be reinstated again. But all their direct debits from any of their accounts for their membership has now been suspended as well until the centre opens up.
Thank you. Any other? Yes, Councillor Hales.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Henderson. I would similarly like to provide an update, but from the Australian Coastal Councils Association, in regards to measures currently being considered in regards to responding to the national situation we're in. The National Forum on Coastal Hazards has been indefinitely postponed to a later date, and the Association is in the process of writing to the Prime Minister, Premiers and State Environment Ministers in regards to stimulus funding. If they're looking for areas that there's a high need and lots of shovel-ready projects around our nation, there are lots of councils who have plenty of coastal defences and the like ready to go sitting on their shelves, and we would very much appreciate state and federal governments considering those for stimulus packages. So that is the measures currently being considered by the Australian Coastal Councils Association.
Thank you. Any further comments? In that case, all those in favour of receiving the representative reports? All those in favour? Oh. Thank you. That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 16, member reports. Item 16.1 is the mayoral report, March 2020. Could we have a recommendation to receive and note that report? Councillor Schofield and seconded by Councillor Hales. All those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. Elected member reports, March 2020. Could we have a recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Charles. Second for that, Councillor Hales. Thank you. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item 17, matters of urgency. Do we have any matters of urgency? No matters of urgency. Questions on notice? No questions on notice. Questions without notice? No questions without notice. Motions on notice. First item 20.1, motion on notice, fireworks and their alternatives. And I need to ask a question of the CEO because this is a motion I proposed. Can I still propose that motion from the chair?
You can actually.
Very well, I will.
You just can't vote on it.
I just can't vote on it. Oh, drat. Okay. Unless it's tight. Okay. Find the relevant page then. Okay, the motion is that council receive and note the motion on notice report regarding fireworks and their alternatives. This is recommendation 1. Councillor Charles, seconded by Councillor Hales. Thank you. All those in favour of receiving the report? Thank you, that's carried unanimously. And secondly, that the City of Victor Harbor investigate alternatives to the New Year's Eve fireworks displays. We have someone, thank you, Councillor Charles, and seconded Councillor Schofield. Would either of you like to speak to that?
I would, if you don't mind. I'm 100% in favour of this proposal of yours. I have read this thoroughly, of course, and we know the disruption that there is for birds and animals and so on, and none the least the penguins on the island. And if we can come up with some sort of a laser projection into the sky, I think we'll be moving into the future rather than throwing all this pollution around and unnecessary noise. I've always believed it's a waste of money. All fireworks is a waste of money, in my opinion. The Sky Show in Adelaide used to be, a thrilling thing to go to, of course, but even that has disappeared off the calendar. So I think we can move forward without polluting the water, without polluting the air, and without upsetting everybody. And I don't think we're going to lose one darn soul if we pick the right way of going with this.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, sorry,
sorry.
soul. I mean, I don't think we'll lose one single person who will avoid Victor Harbour as a result of it. They'll still come here. They'll still sit on their balconies. Whether they can see it or not, well, that's beside the point.
Thank you. Councillor Schofield?
Yes, look, I agree with this, and I agree with what Councillor Charles has said. And I do know, I have been down there, and you can smell those chemicals in the air. So I believe we'll be doing ourselves a great favour in our community, and I look forward to seeing what we're going to come up with.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Robertson?
Yes, thanks, Deputy Mayor. Appreciate the thoughts behind this. Yes, the temporary pollution. I love sniffing up that once a year the smell of fireworks. But I think this, if I understand this motion here, is to investigate the alternatives to a New Year's Eve. I support that and I would not support that there be no fireworks this year. I think that the fireworks, for all their polluting effects, human beings seem to get the most excitement out of activities that create the most pollution. And whatever reason, and that this is looked forward to a lot by a great number of people and the kids in town. Yes, we might be able to, we don't have a big bridge to hang screens off like they do down at Goolwa with the Hindmarsh Island Bridge. But yeah, looking at alternatives, I support this, but I would definitely not support any, I think by the time we get to New Year's Eve this year, people will be looking forward to a bright 2021, and they'll be ushering that in with fireworks is.
If I can reply to that from the chair. Yes, the present contract is in place until the end of 2022. So there's still a couple of years on that present contract. And I just thought this was an opportune time to give us plenty of time to look at alternatives with that 2-year space in which to do it, just starting the conversation. Yes, Councillor Littley.
Kind of stole my my comment on this, but it's unfortunate that, in my mind, it is unfortunate that we do have a contract through to the end of 2022, because I would like to have seen some action this year. I think that across the summer period with the fires that we experienced around the place, and obviously now with a real shift in community focus on what's important to people, I think that the idea of waste, and which I do see fireworks as waste. I've always liked watching fireworks, but it is, in my mind, it is a waste of resources and a waste of better things can be done anyway. But we are in it for a couple of years with the contract, and we would need to honour that. So hopefully that gives us time to really come up with some ideas on how we can celebrate the dawning of a new era, or a new year at least.
Thank you. Councillor Charles?
May I ask a question of the mover of this? Were you considering drones in the sky, laser beams from the ground, and so on? Could you give us a description?
Yes, I personally think we should consider all alternatives. And I'm sure we'll have further discussions on this. Yes, drones are being used more and more with laser lighting. Yeah, so that is one of the options, but there's no reason why we can't have a whole amalgamation of new ideas. And this gives us, I think, plenty of time to look at the alternatives, and there may still be alternatives developing within the next couple of years. And I suspect that the pyrotechnicians are already looking at changing what they do. I believe they're already including laser lighting in some of their shows with the fireworks. So I think, as a good business manager, planner would be doing, they'd be looking into the future as well. Councillor Mann?
Sorry, can I just clarify for the purposes of anyone watching, but also the gallery in our minutes, although Councillor Henderson was brought the motion on notice to the chamber, you, Councillor Charles, moved it on the floor. Just wanted to clarify that.
That's right. Thank you, Victoria. Councillor Mann?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Henderson. Yeah, I understand the views, and I do agree about the environmental risks and those impacts as well. And I do support, I guess, improvements to the cost of the fireworks environmentally and socially. However, I think that, I guess, especially, and I understand that the fireworks and the contract will be progressing this year, but I think in light of everything that's happening and the amount that everyone's day-to-day life is changing this year, I think having that consistent thing at the end of the year is important for people. And I think it will be, and it has been always a special event for everyone. Yeah, whilst I still think that the fireworks are something essential, I guess it is important to see what alternatives or what incorporations, whether that be fireworks and pyrotechnics or different sorts. So I think for that reason, yeah, I'm happy to support this in terms of investigating.
Thank you. There's no further comment. Councillor Charles, would you like to wrap it up? Thank you.
On behalf of the Penguins, I think it's a great idea. And I think they're far more of an asset to us than fireworks once a year. Well, that's it. I won't introduce any more stuff. I mean, that's a daily asset if we can build up our population there. And I'm sure that they've been, anyway, say no more.
Thank you. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 20.2, motion on notice, lot 51 Hindmarsh Road, Victor Harbor. Councillor Peter Charles. Councillor Charles, would you like to read your recommendation? Oh, sorry, we'll receive and note first, item 1, that council receive and note the motion on notice on lot 51 Hindmarsh Road, Victor Harbor report from Councillor Charles. Thank you, Councillor Robertson. A seconder for that, Councillor Hales. Thank you. All in favour of receiving the report? That's carried unanimously. Move on to item recommendation 2, and now I'll ask Councillor Charles if he'd like to read his recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We've had a couple of people working on this, David Kemp, myself. The motion is before you there, that the City of Victor Harbor requests the Minister for Environment and Water, that's the Honourable David Spears MP, to suspend negotiations with the abutting property owners for the sale of the Crown land, being allotment 51 of the deposited plan 111239 Crown Record Volume 6181 Folio 559, to allow time for the City of Victor Harbor to make a written submission detailing the circumstances that warrants a reconsideration from the Minister. bit of history on that is the outstanding revolution, yes, it is a revolution, outstanding resolutions. We've got a lot of them, and we've had one that's been there for a long, long time. It's been there for 3 years and 3 months. It's now been resolved by the Minister being advised to not grant the property, being that allotment 51, to the council for a reserve or to be in the council's custody one way or another. The area we're talking about, for those who are watching and maybe listening still, is the area behind the 7 homes which are on Highmarsh Road, starting from 49 up to 60, whatever it is.
Excuse me, Councillor Charles, the Mayor has just returned to the meeting, so I'd like to pause you then. I'm sure the Mayor will let you continue, and I'll let the Mayor take her position as Chair of this meeting. Thank you.
Okay, I understand we're up to Councillor Charles has moved his motion. I'll just ask for a seconder before we continue the debate. Councillor Charles, do you have a seconder? Councillor Kemp, thank you very much. Councillor Charles, do you want to continue your debate?
Thank you, Mayor. And this is good because now Marilyn or Henderson, you'll be able to vote for me on this one. The issue raised its head some 4 years ago with the sale of some Crown land to a gentleman who ended up extending his property, putting down a retaining wall at some huge expense and building a shed, thus blocking off what was an easy access. It's now not an impossible access, it is still a very, very doable access for the bike and walking trail to head behind these properties at Hayward Court, or meeting up with Hayward Court. The slope is quite reasonable in comparison to the current track that goes up the footpath, which is dangerous, undulating, and just not appropriate for people speeding down a footpath on a push bike or a skateboard or whatever else. I really wasn't going to say too much about this because we presented councillors with a research paper, we've called it, and it brings out information which I think you probably all read and had an opportunity to consider. The issue that really should annoy this council is the fact that consultation was had with the 7, or requested by from the 7 owners of the property which abut this Crown land. 5 of them replied, and out of the 5, 1 was just through an unassociated company with, I can't think of the correct name now, but there's no time to remember it either because I've only got a short time to speak. But having made these having put their thoughts in writing and being given more than enough time to do so, the people from Juna said, well, that's fine. Now we'll take what you say and we won't even do any consultation with the council. I take it very personally because it was my motion that got it as far as it went. It was a to and fro sort of a situation for 4 years where we were offered the land, we applied for it, it was given to us or offered to us, we refused it somehow or other, don't know how that happened, because I'm talking about the council, some error in clerical work. It was then applied for officially by our former CEO, and then with the change of government and so on, these things move very, very slowly. It's now been taken out of our hands. But I want to draw councillors' attention to the fact that the Bridge Terrace bikeway, which is only a very short stretch, has created a lot of interest with the residents, and so much so that we've had a consultation with the residents. It seems to me that if we're going to be running something 3 kilometres at $3 million or $1 million a kilometre bikeway down through an area of sand dunes, an environmental area, we should be speaking to our residents and our community, and we should be asked as a council by the Minister for our comments, because we can rebut all of this. Does that mean I've got 30 seconds left? That ding?
Yes.
Okay. I was going to read the summary, but I don't think there's really any need to. I think probably my associate David Kemp will give this some legs, and I'll try not to bring in any new information when I do a summary at the end. Thank you.
Charles, Councillor Kemp, did you want to speak to this?
Thank you. I do support this motion due to the fact that this has been going on for a long time for council and with no traction for a number of reasons. And for due senior planning officers to write a report to the Minister recommending that they merge or sell the land off to these property owners without what I believe an opportunity for our council to put a submission in, as it was originally designed for, to use for council to look at whether it be some type of community land, some type of bikeway process, whatever the council wanted to do for open space. I believe through this process that's just happened, we've been denied that opportunity to actually approach the Minister with our points of views as to why we would want it and what's the benefits for. But as you read the recommendation, it's really for the CEO on behalf of our council to write to the Minister with a submission detailing what council will use it for, how we would use it, how we would maintain it for the benefit of our community. And that's all this motion's about, is giving us the opportunity to submit. If the Minister decides in the end that he will stick with the original decision and not reverse it, then so be it. But at least we've had an opportunity to submit and put up our case.
Does anybody else want to speak to the recommendation? Councillor Robertson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I totally support this. If that land sale goes ahead, that would just be adding fuel to the fire in terms of the outrageous things that happened in relation to selling that strip of Crown land to the owner of whatever it is, 72 on Marsh Road, and this would be terrible if the Dude thinks that they wouldn't be transferring this land to the council.
Councillor Henderson.
Whilst it would be very nice to for the council to have opportunity to own this land and make use of it in terms of a shared pathway, my concerns are that any further negotiations with state departments might take an inevitably long time, as the original discussions did, up to 4 years. My question to the staff is, firstly, do we really need this piece of land? Would it be worth waiting for that length of time, with the possibility of having this piece of land on which to establish the shared pathway? Or can we go ahead with the present plan we have in place for the shared pathway? And what does the CEO think of any possibility of influencing the state departments to think otherwise than the decisions they've already made?
Through the Mayor, just in response to that, I'll take your last question first. Obviously, I did write to Department of Crown Lands, obviously to identify if there was a process to appeal the dedication or the refusal for a dedication, and I included that commentary within the report, or Glenn Sanford has, that came from Tony Hall. It's not to say that there isn't a process. Well, there isn't a process, but it doesn't say that we can't. So it's open to the council to appeal. I guess if you look at the commentary which we've provided, is if council is committed or dedicated to putting that shared path along the piece of that land, it doesn't actually need to have it dedicated to do that. We have plenty of examples where we actually have care and control of Crown land, and we have infrastructure on Crown land. It's actually to ascertain whether it's structurally you can do it and use it for that, or if council is wanting to have the piece of land dedicated to it for just reserve and open space, that would obviously be what we would need to make the submission for to the Crown land. We'd need to articulate what you want to be using it for. All along, the council could have actually done designs and plans and put a proposal that you wanted to a cantilever or whatever that proposal would have been around that path along the back of that, even if it wasn't in your dedication, which council has done many times before. So currently the proposal, there is no harm in us putting something together to the Minister to seek that. Certainly that process is open to us, and Crown Land have already said that. Councillor Glasbrook.
Well, I'm very much in favour of either dedication or care and control. It doesn't make a lot of difference to me. It's quite obvious that that is the ultimate alignment of the bike track. I mean, if we're really wanting our community to be more bike friendly, you know, that's the opportunity, because if we put this right down the bottom of the hill there, people can't get to it. For a significant part of our town, up through Hayborough, you won't be able to get down to use it. You'll have to use the roads, which is what we're trying to avoid. So I certainly believe this is obviously the best opportunity. It's also the best views. If we're wanting a world-class bike track, the views along there are far superior than they are down the bottom, because you don't have the height. There would obviously be issues with the environment and safety and all sorts of things with having the bike track down the bottom, along the bottom of the sandhills, which need to be considered. So I think blatantly obvious, as I said, that this would be the preferred option, and certainly my preferred option. So I'll be supporting it 100%.
Charles, do you want to close the debate?
Thank you, and thank you for those who spoke positively toward this. No harm, our CEO said, to apply. Well, there'll be a great deal of harm to council's reputation, and please don't think that that's a threat by any means. When the public discover that there's this environmental area, there's this human intrusion into an environmental area, and I think it's got to be one of the most expensive bike tracks in the world at $1 million a kilometre, and the equipment that's going to have to be dragged down there, the human intrusion into the area.
Councillor Charles, in closing the debate, can you please not bring any new information and just wrap up the debate that's been had?
I know
Thank you.
these headings councillors are already aware of, and I certainly won't say any more, but when Councillor Glasbrook did mention concerns for community safety, and that involves people being close and approximate to a railway line, probably more so of a problem than having a fence across the road or not, with people with headphones and things on and not even hearing something coming along. We've got an environmental area there, we've got the cost of the whole thing, and if I may just say this much, we don't have to build, as we do down there, the whole lot at once. We end up strengthening the infrastructure for all of these people along these roads up the top, and it will not run along certain roads, it'll go through road reserves, so it'll be a direct route, and people will end up with better roads, better storm order facilities, gutters and so on. And as Councillor Glasbrook has said, it will always be the bike track up there, because to arrive at the top of the hill and then decide whether you're going to walk 50 metres to the left or 20 metres to the right to find a staircase where you're going to put your bike over your shoulder and walk down, it's just not user friendly. They'll continue to ride the current route. You'll never get people off it. We need to improve the route that we've got. Thank you.
Thank you. Now put the motion to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you. We now move on to item 22.1, which is the confidential item. Oh, sorry, motions without notice. I don't think we haven't got any, sorry. So we now move on to...
Sorry, Mayor.
Oh, you have got one? I beg your pardon, Councillor Kemp. I didn't see you there.
I'd like to move this motion without notice. The business of Victor Harbour re-imaging proposal for Victor Harbour be included in the 2021 budget deliberations. I'll say that again. The motion is the business Victor Harbour re-imaging proposal for Victor Harbour be included in the 2021 budget deliberations. The reason why I'm moving this motion to be considered in the budget, I think it's a proper time or a very timely time to bring something to our community. We talk about business continuity, supporting our local businesses in a time now where they are suffering the most they've ever suffered in their careers or their times here. We've approved a small budget allocation tonight to support a business recovery already. So I think that to support our businesses, I think the re-imaging of the Business Harbour proposal is really looking after its businesses for the community and enjoying the economic development. And this is the time when our business do need this support, and I think this will be very well good money spent in developing up that re-imaging project for Business Victor Harbour to manage to support its businesses and to recover from this coronavirus impact that we will be looking at over the next 1 to 2 years potentially in recovery mode. And I think it was good budget deliberation to have a good discussions about how that money could be used to support our economy and support our businesses.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. As I said right at the beginning of this meeting, there is a number of different things that the council can do in relation to the budget and business recovery and assisting our ratepayers. The Reimagining Victor Harbour document from Business Victor Harbour contains a number of different things. As you know, motions without notice is something that I don't think we need to bring to council without having some thought, and I think we need to discuss that, and we can discuss that document along with all of the other things that we may put in place for the businesses, which may be rate relief, it may be relief around the differential rate, it may be a number of different things. So I think that having a motion without notice where people haven't had the opportunity to think about that in conjunction with the bigger picture is something that we shouldn't be having a look at. We need to look at all of that together. So I'm going to be suggesting that you make that a motion on notice and we can bring it to the next council meeting.
Oh, that's fine, Mayor. Look, whether it's really about whether you accept it as a motion without notice or motion on notice, fine. We've already had a presentation. We've had a lot of information on it. We've had literature which we've read about this whole proposal. All it is just bringing it to the table for the part of the budget deliberations to say, do we want to talk about it? Do we want to put it in that? But certainly, I'll bring it to a motion on notice if you like, Mayor. I'm quite happy that way as well.
Thank you. And we may not even need a motion in relation to bringing it in there, but I'll take that as a motion on notice. Councillor
I
Charles.
was wanting to second that. There's, plenty of people wanting to second this. We're only asking it to go to the budget for deliberations. We're not making a decision whether you get a six-figure number or anything at all. So I think we move forward with this,
I'll just
if you don't mind.
I'll just check with the CEO that we need a motion for this to go forward. You know, I don't think that we need a motion. And, you know, motions without notice should be very simple or very urgent. And at the moment, what we're putting into place to support our businesses, we can do with delegations. And when we're looking at medium term, then things will come through the budget process. But do we need that to come to council as a motion, or is it something that can come back to the budget if we ask?
It's not my place to say whether you need a motion or on the matter or not. You're the presiding member to determine whether you take a motion on notice or not. In terms of the document you're referring to, council has received a presentation from Business Victor Harbor, and we have advised Business Victor Harbor that we will include it as part of the budget deliberations. And I did say that at the last workshop, but it is really up to the chamber whether you want to formally do that. But it's the presiding member's decision as to whether you take it as a motion without notice or on notice.
Okay. I'm taking it as a motion on notice, as the CEO said, and I recall we did say to Business Victor Harbor that we will be bringing that to the budget workshop and talking about it anyway. So it's not something that we need, and certainly not as a motion without notice.
In that case, if the chamber is quite clear that it will be part of the budget deliberations, I don't see we need to have a motion on notice if it's going to be part of that deliberation. I just want to make sure it wasn't lost, that's all.
Yep, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Are there any further motions without notice? In that case, we move to the confidential items, and the recommendation is that pursuant to section 92 of the Local Government Act 1999, the council orders that all members of the public, except for the Chief Executive Officer, Victoria McCurdy, Director Corporate and Customer Services, Karen Rochitinsky, Director Community Development, Graham Pathouse, Director Environment and Infrastructure, Glenn Sanford, Group Manager Governance and Finance, Kelly Knight Stacey, and Executive Assistant, Karina Overall, be excluded from attendance at the meeting for agenda item 22.1, confidential, Victor Harbor horse-drawn Granite Island track replacement. The council is satisfied that, pursuant to section 93K of the Act, the information to be received, discussed or considered in relation to this agenda item be included current tenders for the provision of goods and services, being replacement of tram track on Granite Island, and the information is commercial in confidence. The council is satisfied that the principle that the meeting be conducted in a place open to the public has been outweighed in the circumstances, because the information to be disclosed and the information to be discussed has a potential to impact adversely on each of the tenderers, as competitive commercial information will be disclosed. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Hales, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Henderson. Either of you want to say anything to that? Does anybody want to say anything? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you.